The Panama Canal has always been one of the most important waterways in the world, but in today's global climate it has become much more than just a shipping shortcut. The canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, saving ships thousands of miles in travel and billions of dollars in trade costs. For the United States, the canal has historically been a symbol of influence and security in the Western Hemisphere. Washington sees it as a vital lifeline for global trade, energy shipments, and military strategy. Control over its operations ensures that U.S. commercial and defense interests remain protected. At the same time, China has expanded its economic reach in Panama through major investments in ports, shipping, and infrastructure. Beijing's long-term strategy is clear: gain a foothold in one of the most strategic chokepoints of global trade. Chinese companies are heavily involved in logistics hubs surrounding the canal, which creates concern in Washington about possible economic leverage or political influence. The map of the region shows this tension clearly. U.S. naval routes, security agreements, and economic interests run directly into China's Belt and Road Initiative projects. Panama, caught in the middle, benefits from both sides but also feels the weight of the tug-of-war. For ordinary Panamanians, the canal represents jobs, revenue, and international prestige, but for world powers it is a chess piece in a much larger geopolitical contest. For more than a century, the United States has viewed the Panama Canal not only as a commercial gateway but also as a matter of national security. Even after formally handing control of the canal to Panama in 1999, Washington maintained strong diplomatic, military, and intelligence ties in the region. The U.S. Southern Command, based in Miami, still treats Central America as a strategic priority, and Panama sits at the very heart of this focus. Maps of U.S. influence in Panama reveal naval cooperation agreements, joint training missions, and access rights for American vessels. While there are no permanent U.S. bases inside Panama today, American forces frequently rotate through for counter-narcotics operations, maritime patrols, and regional exercises. This presence ensures that Washington has the ability to respond quickly if the canal or nearby shipping lanes were ever threatened. From Washington's perspective, Chinese involvement in Panama raises alarms not just economically but militarily. The fear is that commercial infrastructure projects could someday be leveraged for strategic purposes, giving Beijing influence over critical logistics hubs. U.S. officials argue that keeping a visible presence in the region sends a strong signal to both allies and competitors. The canal remains under the watchful eye of the United States. For Panamanians, this presence is a double-edged sword. On one hand, U.S. support contributes to regional security and protects trade. On the other hand, it revives debates about sovereignty and the lingering shadow of past American control. Yet, as the global tug-of-war between Washington and Beijing intensifies, Panama's location makes it nearly impossible for the U.S. to step back. The military dimension underscores just how central the canal remains in America's broader strategy of maintaining influence in the Western Hemisphere. China's rise in Panama has been driven less by warships and more by cranes, shipping containers, and construction projects. Over the past 2 decades, Beijing has steadily expanded its economic footprint across the country, investing billions of dollars in ports, logistics zones, and infrastructure tied directly to global trade. For China, Panama is not just another trading partner, it is a gateway to the Americas. Strategically located at the crossroads of 2 oceans, Chinese companies now operate several critical facilities near the canal, including container terminals at both the Pacific and Atlantic ends. These projects give Beijing valuable access to the flow of goods between Asia, the United States, and Europe. Beyond ports, China has funded energy plants, highways, and even telecommunications networks in Panama. All of these investments fit neatly into Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, its global strategy to secure trade routes and expand influence through infrastructure. While Panama has welcomed Chinese investment for the economic boost it brings, Washington views it with suspicion. U.S. officials worry that Chinese-controlled facilities could eventually be used as leverage in political negotiations or, in a crisis, restrict access to vital trade routes. The concern is not only about commerce but also about the possibility that economic influence could translate into security risks. For Panama, Chinese involvement presents both opportunities and dilemmas. The projects generate jobs and revenue, but they also tie the nation more closely to Beijing's global ambitions. Maps of Panama's ports and industrial zones now show a growing presence of Chinese companies, reflecting how deeply embedded China has become in the country's economic landscape. This quiet but powerful expansion highlights the other side of the tug-of-war, one fought with investments and trade rather than troops and bases. Panama's government often finds itself in the uncomfortable position of balancing two giants. On one side is the United States, its historic partner and security guarantor. On the other side is China, a rising power offering lucrative investments and infrastructure deals. This tug-of-war places enormous political pressure on Panama's leaders, who must navigate domestic priorities while avoiding the perception of leaning too far toward either Washington or Beijing. Elections in Panama often bring these tensions to the surface. Candidates debate whether to prioritize U.S. ties rooted in history and defense or embrace China's economic promises. For many voters, the question is practical: who can deliver jobs, stable trade, and better living conditions? Yet behind the scenes, lobbyists, diplomats, and business interests work hard to sway Panama's policies in favor of one global power or the other. American diplomats emphasize shared democratic values, security cooperation, and long-standing cultural ties. They warn Panama about becoming too dependent on Chinese loans and infrastructure. Meanwhile, Chinese officials highlight investment opportunities, fast financing, and the potential of integrating Panama more fully into Asia's booming markets. These competing narratives create friction in parliament, in the media, and among business elites. The visual metaphor of two hands pulling Panama's flag in opposite directions perfectly captures this dilemma. To some Panamanians, it feels like their sovereignty is under constant external pressure. To others, it represents opportunity, leveraging global competition to extract the best possible deals. Ultimately, Panama's political landscape is shaped not just by local issues but by global rivalry. Every trade agreement signed, every port expansion approved, and every telecommunications contract awarded becomes part of a larger geopolitical contest. For Panama's leaders, the challenge is clear: keep the nation's independence intact while benefiting from both sides of the tug-of-war. The struggle over Panama is not just a regional matter, it carries consequences for the entire world. The Panama Canal is one of the most critical arteries of global commerce, with nearly 5% of all international trade passing through its locks each year. Oil tankers, grain shipments, manufactured goods, and raw materials flow through this narrow corridor, linking Asia, the Americas, and Europe in a chain of supply that powers the global economy. Whoever wields influence over Panama has leverage far beyond Central America. For the United States, the canal represents security for its shipping industries and military logistics. Ensuring that this waterway remains open and neutral is vital for global stability. Washington argues that if China gains too much control, it could potentially disrupt trade in times of crisis. For China, however, Panama is part of a bigger picture: securing reliable access to markets and protecting its own supply chains. Beijing sees the canal as a stepping stone in its larger ambition to create a worldwide network of ports and trade hubs. Other nations are watching closely. European powers rely on the canal for their exports and imports, while Latin American neighbors are concerned about how this rivalry might impact regional stability. Even countries far from Panama, like Japan or India, depend on its smooth operation to keep their shipping costs low. The imagery of a global tug-of-war centered on Panama captures the high stakes perfectly. It is more than a battle of influence, it is a contest over the architecture of international trade and power in the 21st century. Panama, though small in size, sits at the crossroads of oceans and empires, making it one of the most strategically significant pieces on the global chessboard today.